They say your 30s are when you truly come into your own. I always imagined mine would be a grand unveiling, a celebration of everything I'd built. I just never imagined it would be the demolition of it all, starting with my own birthday. Cake. Our home, a meticulously restored brownstone in a quieter part of Chicago, was my pride. Every antique Eames chair, every carefully chosen Farrow and Ball paint swatch whispered of a life curated, a life of quiet success. Ethan, my husband of 5 years, was the charming architect of this public image, always ready with a supportive smile for my interior design business, always the perfect host. But behind the handcrafted oak doors, the silence had started to grow, to fester, especially in the rooms we'd earmarked for a nursery. For 2 years, trying had been our silent, third roommate. 2 years of ovulation kits, temperature charts, and hushed, hopeful conversations that slowly turned into strained whispers, then into nothing. Ethan, ever the pragmatist, or so I thought, would pat my hand and say, "It'll happen when it happens, Sarah love." But his eyes, they'd already left the room, moved on to the next project, the next distraction. I once found a brochure for a high-performance sports car tucked inside his fertility research folder, a tiny, absurd betrayal that pricked, sharper than any needle. My little sister Olivia, 2 years my junior, was a whirlwind of bright lipstick and fleeting ambitions. She'd always had a talent for capturing the spotlight, often by subtly nudging others into the shadows. Her visits were always a flurry of excitement and, I was beginning to realize, a strange, almost imperceptible inventory of my life, my home, my husband. There was a new glint in her eye lately, a possessiveness when she looked at Ethan that I'd dismissed as sisterly affection. How naive I had been. The preparations for my 30th birthday party were in full swing. An intimate dinner at the Crimson Room, our favorite upscale haunt downtown. Ethan was handling all the arrangements, a grand gesture, he'd called it. "You just relax and get beautiful, darling," he'd said, kissing my forehead. But that morning, while looking for a misplaced earring in his gym bag, my fingers brushed against not one, but 2 new, expensive-looking silk ties, ones I hadn't bought, and definitely not his usual style. And then there was the scent clinging to his jacket when he came home late the night before. A perfume I knew wasn't mine, but achingly, disturbingly familiar. It was Olivia's signature Jasmine Noir. The pieces were there, scattered and confusing, but my mind, conditioned by years of trust, refused to assemble them into the monstrous picture they were forming. Not yet. The Crimson Room was living up to its name, bathed in a sultry, expensive glow. Soft jazz barely masked the frantic thumping of my own heart. Our reserved private alcove, intended for intimacy, felt more like an interrogation chamber than a celebratory space. The velvet ropes a flimsy barrier against the impending disaster I could feel brewing in my gut. Ethan was a little too attentive, almost obsessively so. His hand, a constant clammy pressure on the small of my back, adjusted my chair every time I shifted. His laughter, whenever my parents or our few close friends offered toasts, was a shade too loud, a bit too forced. He even refilled my water glass 3 times in 10 minutes, a nervous energy crackling around him. He was performing, I realized with a sickening lurch, not for me, but for an unseen audience, or perhaps trying to convince himself. Then Olivia arrived, fashionably late, naturally, as if the world patiently awaited her presence. She swept in wearing a dress that was perhaps a size too small, a vibrant crimson that dared to compete with the restaurant's opulent decor, and heels that clicked with an almost aggressive confidence on the polished floor. It wasn't just an entrance. It was a calculated statement, a demand for attention. Her eyes, wide and unnervingly bright, performed a swift scan of the room, bypassing my parents, lingering on Ethan for a fraction of a second that stretched into an eternity for me, before finally settling on my face with an effusive, almost theatrical, "Happy birthday, big sis." The hug she gave me was tight, her cheek brushing mine with a coolness that belied her warm words. It felt strangely proprietary, as if staking a claim on something, or someone, in this room, not offering genuine comfort. The small talk that followed was a minefield, each sentence laden with unspoken anxieties. My mother, bless her determinedly, oblivious heart, prattled on about Olivia's latest, almost famous social media collaboration, a brand deal for some obscure wellness tea. My father, a man of few words but possessing an almost unnerving observational acuity, kept glancing, between Ethan and Olivia, then back to me, a subtle furrow etching deeper into his brow. I caught his gaze, a silent question passing between us, and a cold dread trickled down my spine, confirming my own unease. He, too, sensed the discordant, dangerous note vibrating in the air. Olivia, meanwhile, skillfully deflected any real questions about her own life, preferring to turn the conversation back to me, or, more pointedly, to Ethan. "You look a little stressed, Ethan," she'd said at one point, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Sarah not working you too hard, is she?" A comment so seemingly innocent, yet so clearly designed to needle, to imply. Ethan, usually so smooth and articulate, fumbled with his wine glass when Olivia later asked him a direct, overly familiar question about a confidential detail of his latest construction project, something I myself hadn't even been fully briefed on. His answer was vague, clipped, his eyes darting around. "He's just been so swamped, haven't you, darling?" Olivia cooed, her voice a silken purr as she reached across the table, her perfectly manicured fingers playfully, possessively tapping his hand. It was a gesture so casual in its execution, yet so breathtakingly intimate in its implication. It made the air crackle with unspoken tension. My own hand, resting on my lap beneath the heavy linen napkin, clenched into a fist so tight my nails bit into my palm. I remember needing to excuse myself for a moment, just to breathe. As I walked towards the powder room, out of the corner of my eye, I saw their heads lean in close together, a conspiratorial whisper passing between them before they quickly straightened, up, startled, as a waiter approached their side of the table. The gifts were presented. Thoughtful, expensive tokens from my parents and our close circle. A first edition of my favorite novel, A Spa Weekend. Ethan's was a delicate diamond necklace, a classic piece I'd idly admired in a shop window months ago. He fastened it around my neck, his fingers surprisingly cold, almost trembling against my skin. "To my incredible wife," he murmured. His lips brushing my ear, the scent of his familiar cologne suddenly mixed with a faint, almost imperceptible trace of jasmine. Olivia's jasmine. The words felt like ash in his mouth, rehearsed, hollow, like lines from a tired play he was desperate to see end. Olivia's gift was saved for last, presented with a flourish. A small, elegantly wrapped box. Inside, nestled on a bed of rich satin, was a single, antique silver baby rattle. The room plunged into an unnerving silence. Not a congratulatory silence, the kind that follows happy news, but a stunned, deeply uncomfortable one. My mother gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's frown deepened into a scowl. Ethan stared at the rattle as if it were a live grenade, his face paling. "I just thought, you know." "For the future," Olivia trilled, her voice a high, brittle tinkling, shattering the quiet. She wasn't looking at me, not directly. Her gaze, full of a strange, triumphant little smile, was fixed on Ethan. "It's never too early to hope, right? Ethan? Or to plan?" The way she added that last word, the almost predatory glint in her eyes as she held his gaze, sent a true shockwave through me. And in that precise moment, watching his Adam's apple bob convulsively in his throat, his eyes darting towards me with a flicker of sheer panic before skittering away, the monstrous, sickeningly clear picture finally, irrevocably, clicked into place. This wasn't just a passive wish for my future. This was an active, deliberate declaration about hers. And his. The antique silver rattle lay on the pristine white tablecloth between us, a cold, metallic omen. The air in the Crimson Room's private alcove was thick enough to choke on, every breath labored. My father's stony silence was a judgment in itself. My mother's fluttering hands and darting, panicked glances between Olivia and Ethan painted a picture of social ruin. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the rattle, his knuckles white where he gripped his water glass, a muscle, twitching erratically in his jaw. Olivia, however, seemed to draw strength from the suffocating tension. She picked up the rattle, its tiny silver bells emitting a series of cheerful, wholly inappropriate chimes in the heavy silence. "Well," she began, her voice falsely bright, a brittle veneer over something hard and calculating. She glanced at Ethan, a quick, almost imperceptible nod passing between them, a signal I wouldn't have caught if my senses hadn't been screaming. At a fever pitch. "Since the, future seems to be on everyone's mind." She paused, letting the insinuation hang in the air, a poisonous perfume. "Ethan and I..." "Well, we have some news," she continued, finally turning her gaze to me, though it was less a look of confession and more one of defiant challenge. "We're pregnant." The two words dropped into the room like stones into a still pond, the ripples of shock instantaneous and brutal. My mother let out a small, strangled cry, immediately stifled. My father visibly recoiled as if struck. Our friends, faces frozen in disbelief, looked from Olivia to Ethan, then to me, searching for some explanation, any explanation, for this madness. Ethan finally looked up, his face a mask of tortured anguish that even in my dawning horror I recognized as patently false. "Sarah, darling, we never meant for you to find out like this," he stammered, reaching for my hand with a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt like the touch of a viper. His eyes pleaded, not for forgiveness, but for my complicity in his charade. For me to play the understanding wife. It just happened. It was a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. A mistake, a 5-year marriage, years of shared dreams, now dismissed as a prelude to his mistake? A mistake? Olivia chimed in, her voice sharp, cutting through Ethan's pathetic mumbling. "Don't be so dramatic, Ethan. It's not a mistake when you love someone." Her eyes flickered towards me again, a glint of pure, unadulterated triumph in them. She was enjoying this, every second of my unraveling. This wasn't an accidental reveal. This was a meticulously planned execution. My throat closed. Words, 1,000 screaming accusations, died before they could form. I could feel the blood draining from my face, the room starting to tilt. This was it, the moment they expected me to shatter, to become a hysterical, weeping mess, confirming their narrative of me as the unstable, perhaps infertile wife he was justified in leaving. And a part of me, the part that still clung to the ghost of the man I thought I'd married, the sister I thought I'd loved, did shatter. The pain was a physical blow, stealing my breath, crushing my chest. I remember my hand flying to my mouth, a gasp escaping. Tears welled, blurring their triumphant faces into grotesque caricatures. How could you?" I finally whispered, the words barely audible, laced with a genuine, soul-deep agony they mistook for complete surrender. My shoulders slumped. I let a single tear trace a path down my cheek. I let them see the devastation. "Oh, Sarah," my mother, rushed to my side, not to comfort me, but to manage the scene. "Don't make things worse than they are. We'll figure this out as a family." Family? The word was a cruel joke. Ethan continued his performance of remorse, while Olivia watched me, her expression a carefully constructed mask of sympathy, but her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, were assessing my every tremor, every tear. They were waiting for the full breakdown, the explosion that would validate their actions. And as I sat there, feigning a descent into a grief so profound I could barely function, a different, colder part of my mind was already working, already calculating. The image of that damning medical report, the one I'd found tucked away in Ethan's secure home office safe after a desperate late-night search fueled by months of gnawing suspicion, flashed behind my eyes. Azoospermia, the diagnosis, had read. 0. Absolutely, unequivocally 0. This baby, this celebrated mistake, could not possibly be his. They thought they were playing me. They had no idea the game I was about to start. The party ended not with a bang, but with the whimpering, undignified exit of my dignity. Or so they believed. The tears stopped that night. What replaced them was a clarity I hadn't felt in years, a chilling resolve that settled deep in my bones. My first phone call wasn't to my mother, who I knew would only offer platitudes and pressure me to forgive. It wasn't even to a lawyer, not yet. It was to Maya, my sharpest friend, the one who saw the world in black and white, no shades of gray, and right now I needed that stark clarity as I laid out the ugly, tangled mess of their betrayal. Piece by sordid piece, a new kind of fire ignited within me, burning away the shock and the pain. They thought they'd seen me broken. They had merely witnessed the shedding of a skin I know longer needed. The hunt for the real truth, the irrefutable proof that would not just expose them, but dismantle their entire deceitful world, was about to begin. And believe me, the secrets I was about to uncover, the meticulously laid traps I was preparing to spring, would make that birthday announcement look like a clumsy, amateurish prank. The dawn after my 30th birthday felt less like a new day and more like the quiet, eerie aftermath of a devastating storm. The remnants of the party, a forgotten champagne flute, a wilting rose, were stark reminders of the life that had been publicly, brutally detonated. Sleep had been a stranger, replaced by a frantic replay of Olivia's triumphant smirk, Ethan's pathetic excuses, and that one damning word, azoospermia. My first coherent thought wasn't about breakfast or work or even the crushing weight of betrayal. It was a name, Maya. Maya, with her razor-sharp legal mind and a loyalty fiercer than any guard dog. Before the sun had fully breached the Chicago skyline, I was on the phone, my voice raspy but firm. "Maya, it's Sarah. I need you, now." There was no hesitation in her reply, just a calm, "My office, 1 hour. Coffee or something stronger?" Maya's downtown office, usually a hub of calm professionalism, felt like a war room as I spilled the sordid contents of my birthday celebration. I laid out every detail, every nuance, every chilling realization, from the baby rattle to the shared glances, and finally, the ace up my sleeve, Ethan's infertility diagnosis. Watching Maya's expressions shift from concerned friend to incensed advocate was a strange sort of validation. I wasn't crazy. This was as monstrous as I perceived it. "Azoospermia," Maya repeated, her voice low and dangerous after I finished, tapping a pen against a legal pad. And he knew? For how long? "I found the report from nearly 18 months ago," I confessed, the shame of my own prolonged ignorance still burning. Hidden, deep. "So, for at least a year and a half," Maya mused, her eyes narrowing. "He's been letting you go through hell, blaming your body, your stress, while he knew he was the one who couldn't perform, so to speak." The clinical detachment in her voice was exactly what I needed, a scalpel to cut through my emotional fog. "And Olivia," Maya continued, "his sister-in-law, your baby sister, waltzes in, pregnant, and they both point the finger at him as the father." She let out a short, incredulous laugh. The audacity is almost admirable if it weren't so repulsive. "They expected me to crumble, Maya," I said, the memory of their expectant faces making my stomach churn. "To accept it, maybe even blame myself further." "And you didn't," Maya stated, not a question, but a fact, a small, proud smile touching her lips. "You played the part, but you didn't break." "The medical report I have," I pressed. "Is it enough?" Maya leaned back, considering. "It's a powerful piece of evidence, Sarah, a very big gun. It proves Ethan is infertile now, or at least was 18 months ago. It shreds their current narrative about this pregnancy." But then she added the crucial caveat, the one that set the course for everything that followed. "But to truly dismantle them, to understand the full scope of this deception, and to protect yourself legally and financially, we need more." "More?" I whispered, a new wave of exhaustion washing over me. What more could there be? "Oh, there's always more when people are this deceitful," Maya said, her smile turning predatory. "Who is the real father of Olivia's baby? How long has this affair, or whatever it is, been going on between your husband and your sister? And what else has Ethan been hiding if he's capable of a lie this monumental?" These questions, heavy and ominous, hung in the air, a new set of mysteries demanding to be unraveled. The game wasn't just about exposing one lie anymore, it was about excavating an entire foundation of deceit. Leaving Maya's office felt like stepping out of a pressure cooker and into a carefully refrigerated room. The chaotic emotions were still present, but they were now contained, directed, and chillingly purposeful. Maya's parting words echoed. "In my mind, play the grieving wife, Sarah. Let them underestimate you. That's our biggest advantage." It was a role I despised, yet one I knew I had to perfect. The first step was a painful but necessary one, a forensic examination of my own life with Ethan. Maya had advised me to look for patterns, for discrepancies, especially in finances and his schedule over the past 2 years. "Men like Ethan, when they're hiding something this big," Maya had said, "they almost always get sloppy somewhere." It was a bitter pill to swallow, the idea that my marriage, my life, was now a potential crime scene to be picked apart for clues. That evening, back in the brownstone that now felt less like a home and more like a gilded cage I was temporarily occupying, I began. While Ethan was out, a sudden vague work emergency he'd mumbled about, his eyes avoiding mine, I started with his home office. The place I'd lovingly designed for him now felt alien, hostile. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with fear of being caught, but with a strange, cold excitement, the thrill of the hunt. I remembered how I'd stumbled upon that first azoospermia report nearly a year and a half ago. It hadn't been easy. It was buried deep within a password-protected folder, misleadingly labeled Old Tax Returns, on his personal laptop. A folder I'd only accessed out of a desperate hunch after months of his evasiveness about joint fertility consultations he claimed to be attending alone to spare me the stress. He'd always been so condescendingly protective. This time, I was looking for something different, something to corroborate Olivia's pregnancy timeline and to unearth the real father. His browser history was a sanitized wasteland. He was clearly smart enough to cover basic digital tracks. But his credit card statements, meticulously filed by our accountant, told a different story. There were a surprising number of charges at upscale restaurants I'd never been to, florists I didn't recognize, even a recurring charge for a boutique hotel downtown listed under client entertainment. The dates of these entertainments often coincided with Olivia's spontaneous visits or Ethan's late nights at the office. A sickening pattern began to emerge, far more extensive than I had initially allowed myself to imagine. It wasn't just a mistake with Olivia, it was a lifestyle. Then I found the burner phone, tucked away at the very back of his sock drawer, beneath a pile of rarely worn athletic socks. It was an older model, cheap, disposable, the kind of people use when they have something serious to hide. My hands trembled as I powered it on, praying it wasn't password protected. It wasn't. The call log was sparse, mostly deleted, but the text messages. Oh, the text messages. There were dozens, Not from Olivia, but from a name I didn't recognize, Liam S. The messages were a nauseating mix of flirtatious banter, clandestine meeting arrangements, and inside jokes that made my skin crawl. One message from Liam S. read, "Can't wait for our little project to be official. You sure E won't suspect a thing?" My blood ran cold. E had to be Ethan. And project, could that be the baby? This wasn't just an affair Olivia was having behind Ethan's back. This was potentially a conspiracy, and Ethan might be a willing or unwilling participant in a much larger deception than just his infertility. The layers of deceit were suffocating. The burner phone felt like a venomous spider in my hand. Its text messages, a web of deceit spun by Olivia, and this mysterious Liam S. Maya and I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of discreet, caffeine-fueled investigation. The name Liam S. wasn't common, but it wasn't unique either. Our initial online searches yielded a confusing array of possibilities, from college students to retired accountants. "We need to narrow this down," Maya stated, her brow furrowed as she scrolled through endless social media profiles. "Think, Sarah. Any clues from Olivia's past? Any Liams she ever mentioned, even casually?" My mind raced, sifting through years of fragmented memories of Olivia's ever-changing roster of boyfriends and fleeting interests. Then, a faint bell chimed. "There was a Liam," I said slowly. "Liam Slater, her college boyfriend. The one she dated for about a year, the one my mother actually liked because he came from a good family." It seemed too obvious, too neat, but sometimes the truth hid in plain sight. Maya's fingers flew across her keyboard. A few clicks later, Liam Slater's professional networking profile appeared. An architect, working for a rival firm to Ethan's. My stomach twisted. An architect? The coincidence was unsettling. "Okay, so we have a potential Liam," Maya said, printing his profile picture. "Now, how do we connect him to Olivia now, and to this project?" Direct confrontation was too risky. Olivia was slippery, and Ethan was already on edge, probably watching my every move. We needed something concrete, something that tied Liam Slater to Olivia's current life, and, ideally, to the pregnancy. The burner phone messages mentioned clandestine meetings, usually on weekday afternoons. A plan began to form, audacious, and a little terrifying, but necessary. For the next week, I played the role of the grieving, slightly detached wife to perfection. I went to work, I ate, barely. I even allowed Ethan a few stilted, awkward conversations where he feigned concern for my well-being. All the while, Maya and I, using a discreet private investigator Maya knew through her legal contacts, a middle-aged woman named Carol, who looked more like a friendly aunt than a PI, began a quiet surveillance of Olivia. It felt like a betrayal of a different kind, spying on my own sister. But what choice did they leave me? The first few days were fruitless. Olivia's routine seemed normal: yoga classes, shopping trips, lunches with friends I didn't recognize. Carol's reports were dry, factual, offering no hint of a secret lover or a clandestine project. Doubt began to creep in. Was I chasing ghosts? Was the burner phone a red herring? Ethan seemed almost normal too, his earlier nervousness replaced by a cautious, almost sympathetic demeanor. Had I imagined the whole conspiracy? Then, on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, Carol hit pay dirt. Olivia, after leaving her ridiculously expensive spin class, didn't go home. Instead, she drove to a quiet, tree-lined street in a historic district, parked, and entered a charming, renovated Victorian house. A house that, according to the property records Carol quickly pulled, was owned by one Mr. Liam Slater. My breath hitched. It was him. Carol's subsequent photos, taken from a discreet distance, were grainy but undeniable. Olivia and Liam Slater laughing on the porch, his arm around her waist, her hand resting on her slightly swelling belly. One photo even caught them sharing a lingering kiss before Olivia got back into her car. The project was real. The affair was real. And Ethan was either the world's biggest fool or a willing accomplice in this elaborate charade. But Maya, ever the pragmatist, pushed for more. This confirms the affair, Sarah, and strongly suggests he's the father. But it doesn't definitively link Ethan to knowing about Liam or to any deeper conspiracy regarding the baby. She was right. We had a piece of the puzzle, a very large, damning piece, but not the whole picture. What about Ethan's finances? Maya prompted. You mentioned those strange hotel bills. If he's involved in something with Olivia and Liam, or if he's being blackmailed, or if he's simply funding Olivia's project behind your back, the money trail won't lie. The thought of Ethan being blackmailed by my own sister and her lover was a new, horrifying twist I hadn't considered. The deeper we dug, the murkier and more monstrous this whole thing became. We needed access to more than just credit card statements. We needed to see the flow of money, the hidden accounts, the secrets a man like Ethan would bury deep. The next target was clear. Ethan's personal financial records, his private computer, the digital vault where his real secrets lay. The plan to access Ethan's personal laptop felt like something out of a spy movie, minus the cool gadgets and a guaranteed escape route. Maya had laid it out with chilling precision. Ethan had a weekly standing Tuesday night basketball game with his old college buddies. That gave us a 3-hour window max. My role was to ensure he left on time, unsuspecting, while Maya, with her surprisingly adept tech skills, honed from dealing with digital evidence in her legal cases, would attempt to bypass his security. The risk was immense. If we were caught, any legal leverage I had could be compromised. But the thought of him and Olivia, their smug deceit, their stolen moments funded by a life I helped build, was a sharper spur than any fear. Tuesday night arrived with an almost unbearable tension. I feigned a headache, wishing Ethan a fun game, my voice a perfect imitation of a slightly weary but supportive wife. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, Maya slipped in through the back door, a slim backpack containing her laptop and a few specialized tools. "Showtime, partner," she whispered, a grim smile on her face. My heart was a trapped bird against my ribs, but my hands were steady as I led her to Ethan's home office, that meticulously organized, now deeply suspect sanctuary of his. Ethan's laptop was, as expected, password protected. But Maya had anticipated this, armed with a few common exploit techniques and a software tool she'd acquired. Watching her work was like watching a surgeon, focused, precise, her fingers flying across her keyboard. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Every creak of the old brownstone, every distant siren sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. What if he forgot something and came back? What if his game was canceled? Then, a soft click. Maya let out a small, triumphant hiss. "We're in." The desktop was an anodyne landscape of corporate logos and family photos, a horrifyingly normal facade. But Maya wasn't interested in the surface. She dove straight into his financial software, his cloud storage, and his encrypted email archives. And Pandora's box began to creak open. It started with the hidden credit card statements, ones I'd never seen, linked to an offshore account I never knew existed. The charges were a sickening litany: lavish dinners for two at places Ethan claimed he hated, weekend getaways to boutique hotels listed as business trips, and then, the kicker, regular substantial money transfers to a numbered account, with vague references like Project O or monthly support. The dates aligned perfectly with Olivia's sudden influx of designer clothes, her new apartment, and her carefree lifestyle. Ethan wasn't just having an affair, he was bankrolling a double life, using money that was in part mine. But the real bombshell lay deeper, in a folder cryptically named Contingencies. Inside, Maya found scanned documents, offshore investment schemes, and emails detailing transfers of significant sums of money from Ethan's company accounts into his personal offshore accounts. It wasn't just marital deceit. This smelled like embezzlement, serious white-collar crime. He wasn't just a cheating husband, he was a potential felon. The sheer scale of his duplicity was breathtaking, far beyond a simple affair or even the cruelty of the baby deception. He had built his entire life, our life, on a mountain of lies, propped up by stolen money. "Oh, Ethan," Maya breathed, scrolling through a particularly damning email chain between him and an offshore bank. "You haven't just been a bad husband, you've been a very, very stupid criminal." The air left my lungs in a rush. This changed everything. This wasn't just about a broken heart or a betrayed marriage anymore. This was about significant financial fraud. The knowledge was a heavy, cold weight, yet simultaneously a powerful, undeniable weapon. The azoospermia was a personal betrayal. This financial fraud was a betrayal with far-reaching public consequences. My path forward, which had seemed like a murky swamp, suddenly had a very clear, very decisive direction. "Maya," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I think it's time we arranged a little family meeting, and I think your legal expertise will be very much in demand." The family meeting wasn't a tearful confrontation over a dining table, as one might expect from a domestic drama. No, Maya advised a more strategic, legally sound approach. A meticulously crafted legal letter outlining Ethan's documented infertility, Olivia's affair with Liam Slater, backed by Carol's irrefutable photographic evidence, and a preliminary summary of the suspicious financial activities, was dispatched simultaneously to Ethan at his office and to Olivia at her new Ethan-funded apartment. It was a declaration of war, delivered not with a shout, but with the cold, hard precision of a legal document. The fallout was immediate, and in some ways deeply satisfying to witness, albeit from a distance. I had temporarily moved in with Maya, needing the space and her unwavering support. The first call came from Ethan, not an hour after the letters would have been delivered by courier. His voice, usually so smooth and confident, was a frantic, high-pitched squeak. "Sarah, what is this? What are you doing? This is insane. We need to talk, just us." There was no apology, no remorse, just pure, unadulterated panic at being caught. "There's nothing to talk about, Ethan," I'd replied, my voice a calm counterpoint to his hysteria. "Everything that needs to be said is in that letter. My lawyer will be in touch regarding divorce proceedings." Then I hung up, severing that line of communication with a decisive click. Olivia's reaction, relayed to me by a very shaken Carol who had been tasked with observing her, was more theatrical. Apparently, upon receiving the letter, she'd had a full-blown meltdown in the lobby of her chic apartment building, screaming about conspiracies and lies, much to the alarm of her neighbors. Carol's report mentioned Olivia frantically calling Ethan, then Liam, then our mother, her voice escalating with each unanswered call. It seemed the carefully constructed narrative of her miracle pregnancy with my devoted husband was crumbling faster than a sandcastle in a tsunami. The most painful confrontation, however, was yet to come. Our mother. She arrived at Maya's apartment unannounced 2 days later, her face a mask of anguish and disapproval. "Sarah, how could you do this to your sister?" she began, not even a word of concern for me, her actual betrayed daughter. The old, familiar sting of her favoritism was a dull ache now, no longer a fresh wound. "Olivia is pregnant. She's vulnerable. And Ethan, he's your husband." "Was, Mother. He was my husband," I corrected, my voice quiet but firm. "And Olivia is carrying another man's child, a child conceived while she was actively trying to destroy my marriage and pass him off as Ethan's heir." I laid out copies of the photos of Olivia and Liam, the timeline of their affair. Her denial was stubborn, almost pathological. "There must be a mistake. Liam is a good boy. Olivia wouldn't lie like that. Ethan loves you." It was like talking to a brick wall, a wall that had always been tilted in Olivia's favor. "Mother," I said, my patience wearing thin, "the evidence is undeniable. But more than that, The betrayal is undeniable. I then showed her a heavily redacted summary of Ethan's financial duplicity. Not the embezzlement details yet, just the extent of his spending on Olivia, the secret accounts. Her face, already pale, turned ashen. For the first time, a flicker of something other than blind defense for Olivia crossed her features. Perhaps a dawning horror at the scale of the deception, or maybe, just maybe, a sliver of realization about the kind of man her favored son-in-law truly was. "I am divorcing Ethan," I stated, "and I am cutting Olivia out of my life. You can choose to stand by the truth, or you can choose to stand by them, but you can't do both." That was my ultimatum, delivered not with malice, but with the weary finality of someone who had finally, irrevocably, had enough. She left without another word, tears streaming down her face. But whether they were for me, for Olivia, or for the ruin of her own idealized family image, I couldn't tell. And strangely, I found I didn't much care anymore. The weeks following my ultimatum to my mother, and by extension, to the fractured remnants of what I once called family, were a strange cocktail of liberation and lingering grief. The silence from their end was deafening, a stark confirmation of the choices they'd made, or perhaps were too cowardly to unmake. Maya handled the initial divorce filings with Ethan's lawyer, a brisk, impersonal exchange of paperwork that felt anticlimactic after the emotional carnage. There were no more desperate calls from him, no tearful apologies, just the cold, hard machinery of legal dissolution grinding forward. I moved out of the brownstone within a week. Maya helped me find a small, sun-drenched apartment overlooking a park in a different neighborhood, a place Anilos with no ghosts of Ethan or Olivia. Packing up 5 years of my life into sterile cardboard boxes was a brutal but cleansing ritual. Each item I touched, a wedding photo, a souvenir from a trip we'd taken, a piece of furniture I'd lovingly chosen, was a fresh stab, but also a release. Some things I stored, unable to part with the memories they held, however tainted. Others, like his clothes and Olivia's carelessly forgotten trinkets, I donated without a second thought, a symbolic purging. My design business, which had languished during the months of emotional turmoil, became my sanctuary. I threw myself into new projects with a focus I hadn't realized I'd lost. There was a clarity in lines and colors, a satisfaction in creating beauty from blank spaces that soothed the raw edges of my heart. My clients noticed the change, a new boldness in my designs, a more confident energy in my presentations. It was as if shedding the dead weight of my marriage had unshackled a part of my creativity I hadn't known was constrained. This was the first true sign of the phoenix stirring within the ashes. But healing isn't a linear path. There were nights when the silence of my new apartment would press in, and the phantom limb of Ethan's presence beside me in bed would ache with an almost unbearable intensity. There were moments when I'd see a woman laughing with her sister, or a couple cooing over a baby, and a fresh wave of bitterness and loss would wash over me. The azoospermia report, a fact, a weapon, was also a constant, cruel reminder of the children I might never have, a dream Ethan had allowed me to chase while knowing it was a lie for him. These were the scars, I realized, the ones that would likely never fully fade, even as the wounds themselves closed. One afternoon, while sketching designs for a new client, a children's bookstore, I found myself idly drawing a small, intricate bird, its wings spread wide, rising from a swirl of what looked like flames. I hadn't consciously intended it. It just appeared on the page. Looking at it, a sense of profound, almost painful understanding washed over me. I had been burned, yes, reduced to cinders by their betrayal. But I was not destroyed. I was, in fact, just beginning to learn how to fly again, on my own terms, with my own wings, scarred but stronger. The legal battles with Ethan, the full exposure of his financial crimes, Olivia's ultimate fate, those were still to come. But in that quiet moment, With the scent of graphite and new paper in the air, I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in my soul, that Sarah, the woman they tried to break, was truly, finally, ready for whatever came next. The weight of the evidence Maya and I had unearthed from Ethan's digital Pandora's box was suffocating. For days, we sifted through it, cataloged it, and cross-referenced it. The financial crimes were undeniable, a complex web of embezzlement and fraudulent transfers. The family meeting I'd initially envisioned, a dramatic confrontation fueled by personal betrayal, now seemed inadequate, almost trivial in the face of such calculated criminality. Maya laid out the options with stark clarity. "We can use this in the divorce, certainly," she explained, her legal mind dissecting the implications. "It gives you immense leverage." Or, she paused, her gaze steady on mine. "We can fulfill a civic duty, Sarah. This isn't just about you anymore. He's stolen from his company, his partners, possibly even clients." The decision to report Ethan, my husband, the man whose life had been interwoven with mine for 5 years, to the federal authorities was not made lightly. It was a sleepless, gut-wrenching week of wrestling with my conscience. Was this justice, or was it vengeance amplified to a terrifying degree? Could I live with being the one to potentially send him to prison, regardless of his betrayals? I pictured his face, not the charming mask he wore for the world, but the cold, calculating glint I'd seen when he thought I wasn't looking, the casual cruelty in his dismissal of my pain. And then I pictured Olivia, her smug triumph at my birthday, her willingness to destroy my life for her own selfish gains, all bankrolled by Ethan's stolen wealth. The answer, when it finally came, was cold and hard, like a shard of ice in my heart. This was bigger than my personal pain. This was about accountability on a scale I hadn't initially fathomed. It was the only way to ensure true justice, not just for my shattered heart, but for the integrity he had so callously disregarded. The investigation, once Maya had discreetly presented an anonymized dossier of compelling evidence to the appropriate federal channels, moved with a momentum that was both terrifying and validating. Ethan's company, a prestigious Chicago architecture firm known for its gleaming skyscrapers and impeccable reputation, was forced to launch an immediate, intensive internal audit. The pristine facade of Ethan's professional life, so carefully constructed, began to show hairline cracks, then deep fissures, before shattering with spectacular velocity. Gossip, at first hushed whispers in boardrooms and exclusive city clubs, soon escalated into speculative articles in the city's business. Journals, high-level financial probe at Sterling Price Architects, senior partner under scrutiny. Though his name wasn't initially published, the thinly veiled descriptions of the rising star architect with a penchant for offshore dealings pointed unmistakably to Ethan. I watched from the detached safety of Maya's guest room, a silent observer, as the empire he built on a foundation of lies and stolen money began to audibly groan under its own corrupt weight. Ethan's arrest, when it finally came, wasn't the dramatic public spectacle one might imagine from a Hollywood movie. It happened with a quiet, almost anticlimactic efficiency as he was attempting to board a red-eye flight to a small Caribbean island known for its lax extradition treaties. Maya, through a well-placed legal contact, had received an urgent tip that Ethan, likely spooked by the tightening internal audit and the increasingly pointed questions from his board, was a significant flight risk. We'd relayed the information, along with his probable flight details, to the authorities just hours before his departure. The local evening news carried a brief, grainy clip. Ethan, looking disheveled and stunned, a far cry from his usual polished self, being escorted in, handcuffs by 2 stoic FBI agents through a quiet corridor of O'Hare International. There was no dramatic chase, no tearful pleas for the cameras, just the stark, ignominious reality of a white-collar criminal apprehended before he could escape the consequences of his actions. That, I realized with a chilling sense of finality, was a far more fitting and publicly damning end to his elaborate charade than any personal, tear-filled showdown I could have orchestrated. The silence of his downfall was, in its own way, far louder than any scream I could have uttered. Olivia's world, predictably, began to unravel in a different, more personal, yet equally public and humiliating way. With Ethan's considerable assets frozen pending the investigation, her lavish, Ethan-funded lifestyle evaporated overnight. The designer clothes that had once been her armor, the trendy downtown apartment that had been her stage, the endless stream of carefree brunches and shopping sprees all vanished like mist in the morning sun. Carol, our ever-reliable PI, reported that Olivia had been forced to move into a cramped, run-down studio apartment on the city's outskirts, her once vibrant social media presence dwindling from glossy, curated influencer posts to a rarely updated stream of vague, melancholic quotes and blurry selfies. The Project O Ethan had so generously funded, her baby, her ticket to a life of ease, was now her sole, terrifying, and unfunded responsibility. She tried calling me dozens of times, leaving rambling, tearful voicemails. I never listened. I just deleted them, one by one. Then came the inevitable confrontation with Liam Slater. Armed with the irrefutable paternity implications from the burner phone texts Maya had expertly recovered, and backed by Carol's photographic evidence of their clandestine affair, Liam, after an initial period of furious denial and attempts to paint Olivia as a fantasist when first contacted by his own legal counsel, a step Maya had anticipated and advised Liam's lawyer to take, had been cornered into demanding a DNA test for Olivia's baby immediately after its birth. The results were, of course, conclusive. Liam Slater, the good boy from a good family my mother had once approved of, was the father. The miracle baby, the cornerstone of Olivia and Ethan's web of deceit, now had an undisputed and, from all accounts, deeply resentful biological father, unwillingly ensnared in the toxic fallout of their lies. The intricate tapestry of karma, as Maya often dryly remarked, was being woven with meticulous, almost artistic precision, each thread pulling tighter, ensuring no one escaped their due. The whispers and salacious rumors that had ignited at my ill-fated birthday dinner now had concrete, verifiable facts to feast upon, and Olivia, who had once so desperately craved the spotlight, found herself mercilessly scorched by its unrelenting glare, her name a byword for scandal in the social circles she'd tried so hard to conquer. The wheels of justice, once set in motion, ground Ethan's world into dust with an impersonal, relentless efficiency. I didn't attend his sentencing hearing. Maya advised against it, saying my presence wasn't necessary and might only stir up more trauma. She went, of course, a silent sentinel particulars for my interests and relayed the outcome later that day. Ethan, stripped of his tailored suits and arrogant demeanor, had apparently wept openly when the judge handed down a sentence of 7 years in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. 7 years. It felt like an eternity, yet somehow not. Nearly enough for the years of deceit, the shattered trust, the life he had systematically stolen from me. But as Maya recounted his broken sobs, his pleas for leniency citing his impeccable prior record, I felt surprisingly little. No vindictive triumph, no surge of joy, just a quiet, hollow emptiness where the anger used to burn so fiercely. His downfall was his own making, a direct consequence of the choices he had embraced. Olivia's ruin was a slower, more agonizing spectacle, played out not in a courtroom, but in the harsh theater of everyday life. Liam Slater, after the DNA confirmation, had reluctantly stepped up to his paternal responsibilities, but not without a bitter custody battle that painted Olivia in an even more unflattering light, manipulative, desperate, and utterly unprepared for motherhood. He won primary custody, leaving Olivia with visitation rights and a meager child support payment that barely covered the essentials for her new bleak reality. I heard through the grapevine, the same social circles that had once fated her, that she was struggling, Working a series of dead-end retail jobs, her former sparkle extinguished, replaced by a haunted, resentful gaze. There was a part of me, a small, shriveled part I wasn't proud of, that felt a grim satisfaction. But a larger part, the part that was slowly healing, felt a profound, weary sadness for the waste of it all, for the bright potential she had, so carelessly thrown away in her pursuit of my life. One blustery autumn afternoon, months later, I saw her. I was sketching in Lincoln Park, a newfound ritual that brought me peace. Olivia was across the pond, pushing a stroller with a listless, mechanical motion, her usually vibrant clothes replaced by a drab, oversized hoodie. She looked thin, tired, and utterly alone. Our eyes met wahag accidentally across the water, for a fleeting second. There was no recognition in hers, or perhaps she chose not to acknowledge me. And in that moment, seeing her not as the triumphant tormentor, but as a diminished, struggling young woman, the last vestiges of my rage seemed to dissolve, not into forgiveness, but into a kind of detached pity. She was a ghost from a past. Life, a life I had decisively and necessarily exorcised. Maya often spoke of karma, that intricate cosmic ledger. I wasn't sure I believed in it in the traditional sense, but I couldn't deny the almost poetic justice in their unraveling. They had sought to build their happiness on the foundations of my pain, and in doing so, had engineered their own spectacular collapse. It was a harsh lesson, one written in the currency of ruined lives and broken dreams. But it was their lesson, to learn, not mine to continually relive or gloat over. My healing was a quiet, internal process, like tending a secret garden. I focused on my work, which flourished with a renewed passion. I reconnected with old friends whose company I genuinely enjoyed, friends who had known me before Ethan, before the charade. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, listening to stories of resilience that put my own struggles into perspective. It was there, among women rebuilding their lives from far greater devastation, that I began to understand the true meaning of strength, not as the ability to inflict pain in return, but as the courage to heal, to grow, to choose light even after an eternity in darkness. The past, with its betrayals and heartaches, could not be erased, but its power to define my future was diminishing with each passing day, each conscious choice I made to embrace peace over bitterness. The inferno had raged, but from its embers, something new, something unexpectedly resilient was beginning to take root. The final courtroom gavel fell, not with a resounding crash that signified ultimate victory, but with a quiet thud that marked the end of a painful chapter. Ethan's appeals were exhausted, his fate sealed. Olivia, a shadow of her former self, was navigating the murky waters of co-parenting with a resentful Liam, her life a stark contrast to the one she had tried to steal. Their stories continued, but they were no longer intertwined with mine in any meaningful, agonizing way. The cords had been cut, not just legally, but emotionally, spiritually. My own story, however, was just beginning its most authentic chapter. The rage, the bitterness, the consuming need for retribution, they had served their purpose, fueling me through the darkest tunnels. But I realized that holding on to them indefinitely would only keep me tethered to the past, a prisoner of fate, my own making. True liberation, I discovered, wasn't just about seeing them fall. It was about my own ascent, unfettered and free. It reminded me of something I'd once read in a Buddhist teaching Maya had shared. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Letting go wasn't an act of forgiveness for them, not in the conventional sense. It was an act of profound self-love, a reclaiming of my own peace. The phoenix analogy, which once felt like a dramatic metaphor, now resonated with a quiet truth. I hadn't just risen from the ashes. I had been fundamentally reforged in that inferno. The old Sarah, the one who craved external validation, who defined her worth by her marriage or the prospect of motherhood, was gone. In her place was a woman who understood her own strength, her own resilience, a woman who found joy not in the grand, societal milestones, but in the quiet, steady rhythm of a life lived with intention and integrity. My design business thrived, becoming a canvas for my renewed spirit. I took on projects that challenged me, that allowed me to create spaces that nurture and inspire. I even designed a small, serene meditation garden for the women's shelter where I volunteered, a place for quiet contemplation and healing. It was in giving back, in helping others find their footing after their own storms, that I found some of the deepest fulfillment. This, perhaps, was the future I was meant for, one not defined by a husband or a child, but by purpose and connection. I often talk about the nature of suffering and healing. The Christian tenet of forgiveness, once a concept I'd railed against, in my anger began to take on a new meaning. It wasn't about condoning their actions or absolving them of their responsibility. It was about releasing the poison of resentment from my own soul, allowing grace not for them, but for myself to enter. The past, with all its ugliness, was an immutable fact, a scar etched into my history. But scars, I learned, were not just reminders of pain. They were testaments to survival, to the body's and spirit's incredible capacity to mend. I could not change what happened, but I held the brush to paint my future, and I chose vibrant, hopeful colors. There are still days, of course, when a shadow of the past might fall, a fleeting memory, a pang of what might have been. But it no longer consumes me. It's merely a whisper, a reminder of how far I've come. I found solace in simple things, the warmth of the morning sun on my face, the laughter of friends like Maya who had stood by me, the quiet satisfaction of a day's work well done, the intricate beauty of that little bird I'd once drawn, the one rising from the flames. It now hangs framed in my studio, a constant reminder not of the fire, but of the flight. My life didn't magically become a fairy tale. There was no Prince Charming waiting in the wings, no instant erasure of the pain. But what I found was something far more valuable, an unshakable sense of self, a deep well of inner peace, and an unwavering belief in my own ability to forge a new dawn, to find my own light, no matter how profound the darkness had once been. And that, I realized, was the most profound victory of all. Thank you for walking with Sarah on this incredibly difficult, yet ultimately empowering journey. Her story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power we all have to redefine our futures, no matter the betrayals of the past. What is one lesson you'll take away from Sarah's story that resonates with your own life? We'd be honored if you shared your thoughts in the comments below. Your reflections might just be the light someone else needs to see today. Thank you for walking with Sarah on this incredibly difficult yet ultimately empowering journey. Her story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power we all have to redefine our futures, no matter the betrayals of the past. What is one lesson you'll take away from Sarah's story that resonates with your own life? We'd be truly honored if you shared your thoughts in the comments below. Your reflections might just be the light someone else needs to see today. If Sarah's journey to reclaim her life truly moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. And to ensure you don't miss out on future powerful revenge stories, tales of overcoming family betrayal, and more true confession-style narratives that empower and inspire, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We're building a community dedicated to these gripping stories, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. Until next time, may you find strength in your own journey and light in your own dawn.